In today's episode of Mind Mirror, we will talk about exploring how chronic stress reshapes motivation and why your brain mistakes survival mode for lack of ambition. Imagine yourself standing at a crossroads in life, staring down a path that seems to lead nowhere. The weight of the world bears down on you, as if an invisible force is pushing you towards the ground. This is what it feels like when chronic stress takes hold, eroding your motivation and energy. But here's the thing, this state isn't about ambition or a lack thereof, it's about survival. You see, when we're faced with adversity, our brains go into fight or flight mode. This is an instinctual response that's been honed over thousands of years to keep us alive in the face of danger. It's like having a fire alarm inside you, constantly on high alert for potential threats. And as this stress response kicks in, it triggers a cascade of physiological changes, your heart racing, your muscles tensing, and your mind buzzing with anxiety. But here's the kicker, our brains are wired to mistake this survival mode for lack of motivation. It's like we've lost sight of what drives us, what gets us excited about life. We start to feel apathetic, disconnected from our goals and desires. And if we're not careful, this can lead to a vicious cycle of disengagement. We stop trying, we lose momentum, and before long, we're stuck in neutral. So why does this happen? Why do our brains mistake survival mode for lack of motivation? The answer lies in the way stress rewires our brain chemistry. When we're under chronic stress, our hypothalamus, that tiny little dictator at the base of our brain, starts to hijack our motivation centers. It's like our brain is hijacked by a virus, one that tells us we're not good enough, we're not worthy. But what if I told you there's hope? What if I said you can take back control, shake off this toxic feeling, and find your way again? It starts with acknowledging that chronic stress isn't about ambition or motivation, it's about our brain's response to survival. And once you recognize that, you can start to make changes. First, let's talk about what happens in the brain when we're under chronic stress. When our hypothalamus kicks into high gear, it starts releasing stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. These chemicals flood our system, sending signals to every part of our body, our heart racing, our muscles tensing, and our mind racing with anxiety. But here's the thing, these stress hormones are meant to be short-term solutions, not long-term fixes. They're meant to help us respond to threats, not govern our entire lives. And when we're under chronic stress, our brain starts to forget that distinction. It becomes stuck in this survival mode, forever chasing after threats that may or may not ever materialize. Now you might be thinking, but what about all the things I'm supposed to do? What about my goals and dreams? Well, here's the thing. Your goals and dreams aren't going anywhere. They're still there, deep down in your psyche. But your brain is so focused on survival right now that it can't even hear them. So how do we get our brains back online? How do we shake off this toxic feeling of chronic stress and find motivation again? The answer lies in what we call neuroplasticity. Essentially, it means our brain has the ability to change, to rewire itself. And when we're under chronic stress, that process gets disrupted. But here's the good news. You can actually train your brain to overcome this resistance. You can learn to recognize the signs of survival mode and override them with motivation. It starts with self-awareness, recognizing how you feel and what triggers those feelings. For example, maybe you realize that when you're faced with a deadline or a challenging task, you start to feel anxious and disconnected. Maybe you notice that your mind starts racing with worries about failure or success, and then you can take steps to counteract that response. You can tell yourself that this is just survival mode talking. It's not about you or your worth. You can also learn to cultivate motivation by focusing on what drives you, what gets you excited about life, what are your passions and values. When you connect with those things, your brain starts to respond in a different way. Your stress levels decrease, your energy increases, and you start to feel more motivated. But here's the thing, this isn't just about individual effort, it's also about systemic change. The way we live our lives is shaped by the world around us, our workplaces, our communities, our environments. And when we're under chronic stress, those systems can feel overwhelming and suffocating. That's why it's so important to seek support from others. Talking to a therapist or joining a community of people who understand what you're going through can be incredibly powerful. You can share your feelings and experiences with others who get it, who understand that chronic stress isn't about lack of motivation, but about survival. And finally, let's talk about the role of self-compassion in all this. When we're under chronic stress, it's easy to beat ourselves up over our perceived shortcomings or failures. But what if I told you that's not helping? What if I said that instead of criticizing yourself, you could try practicing self-compassion? Self-compassion is like having a gentle voice inside your head, a voice that says, I'm doing the best I can with what I've got right now. It's about acknowledging that we're human, that we make mistakes, and that we're doing the best we can. And when we practice self-compassion, our brains start to respond in a different way. Our stress levels decrease, our energy increases, and we start to feel more motivated. We start to see ourselves as worthy of love and care, not just for what we do, but for who we are. And that's where the magic happens. So what does this all mean? It means that when you're feeling stuck or disconnected from your goals and desires, it's time to take a step back and reevaluate. Ask yourself, am I in survival mode right now? Am I responding to threats or stimuli that may not be real? And then take steps to overcome that resistance. Practice self-awareness, cultivate motivation by focusing on what drives you, seek support from others, and practice self-compassion. Because when we work together, as individuals and as communities, we can create a world where people are thriving, not just surviving. We can create a world where motivation isn't just about individual effort, but about collective change. We can create a world where our brains aren't stuck in survival mode, forever chasing after threats that may or may not ever materialize. So I want to leave you with one final thought. What if you're not living for your goals and dreams? What if you're just trying to survive? Because when we start to see ourselves as worthy of love and care, not just for what we do, but for who we are, that's when the real magic happens. That's when we can find our motivation again. That's when we can take back control and live the life we truly desire. Stay tuned for the next episode of Mind Mirror, a reflection of thoughts you never say out loud.